October 6, 2011 at the Purdue Alumni Reading in the Krannert Building, Aaron Michael Morales, MFA, Purdue graduate and Associate Professor of English and Gender Studies at Indiana State University, spoke about his debut book.
The title of my debut novel is Drowning Tucson, and it's a set of 10 different chapters that sort of interlink characters, and it's set in Tucson, Arizona in the 1980s, and it basically explores the ways in which people's lives interact with each other and the way that complete strangers can have an effect on each other. And because it's set in a very poor and violent neighborhood, it's a book that is also about poverty and violence, masculinity, that sort of thing. What inspired me to write this book was basically a series of films such as 21 Grams, Babel, the movie Trainspotting, a movie called Requiem for a Dream, and then I looked up these authors who made these, whose books the films were based on, and I realized that there was this whole genre of novels that sort of, rather than linearly following one person, they actually followed a series of characters who then interact with each other and focus, and affect each other's lives. So I was inspired by that. The guy who wrote Requiem for a Dream is named Hubert Selby Jr., and he wrote a brilliant book called Last Exit to Brooklyn, which was also made into a terrible movie in the 80s. So he probably affected me the most as a writer, and also a writer named Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who's most famous for a book called 100 Years of Solitude. Both are brilliant authors, and I recommend them to anybody interested in reading or learning to write fiction. I came to Purdue as an MFA student, which is a Master of Fine Arts degree, in 2000, and I graduated in 2003. And I like to think that I didn't know anything about writing when I came here. I obviously wrote, and I was accepted to the program, which has a very good reputation nationally. But while I was here, I was taught a number of things about writing that I had no clue about, and I was also introduced to new writers. But most importantly, the faculty, specifically Patricia Henley and Sharon Salwitz in the English department, just sort of gave me permission to write about the topics that I write about. They gave me permission to write about violence and explore the reasons that people have, the reasons people commit acts of violence against one another. Because I believe firmly that we all have the ability or the inclination to do that, but most of us just fight off, the urges basically to lash out at people. However, there are people that don't, obviously, and so my book was an exploration of that. My best advice to young writers and to people interested in becoming writers is to read voraciously, which sounds simplistic, but really most of what I learned about writing, I learned from reading other writers. And I often tell my students, I'm a professor at Indiana State, I often tell my students that it's like if you want to be a chef, you have to eat other people's food. You have to see what people can do with ingredients and the different styles of cooking. And so the same thing goes for writing. Like, to learn to write, you have to read other writers to see what's been done, to see what's possible, and then sort of find your own niche, find your own voice and your own topics and themes that you want to write about. And then you will find an audience will find you. The publication shouldn't be the part people worry about as much as creating good fiction. Because if you create good fiction, or good writing in general, then you will get a place to publish your work. You can purchase my book, Drowning Tucson, at Vaughn's bookstore here in town. I believe if you have a Barnes & Noble, they carry it, as does Borders, and any online bookstore such as Amazon, which is the cheapest, of course, so you can get used copies for like $3 or $4. But the regular price is $15.95 or something, so if you go to Vaughn's, it'll probably be like $17 or something like that. But if you're trying to do things on the cheap, you can certainly get used copies online, dirt cheap, and I encourage you to do so.